Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Probably a bits and bobs video today. Not quite sure what I'm going to get up to. I was just walking out here this morning. It's definitely Orange City at the moment, isn't it? There's definitely a lot of orange around. I think what I will film today is an update on the Holey clay pots. That's going to put 3 lots of orange in for a start, and a bit of pink. Yeah, a couple of points. Sending me emails, it doesn't get quick responses, quite honestly. I don't look at the email box that goes with my channel very often. Literally not very often. So it's not necessarily the best place to tuck things away. Also, if you send me a personal message, in other words a YouTube personal message, nothing to do with emails this time, I will always respond to them, but you have to bear in mind YouTube itself does not notify me when I get a personal message, and I suspect it doesn't notify you when I reply. So if you've sent me a personal message, I'm not ignoring you. You'll have to go and look at your message to see the reply. You've got to go and look. It won't just come and hit you in the face like the comments do. Yeah, so a couple of sort of communication issues. What else? I think that was it. Yeah, I think I'll do an update on the Holey clay pots today as I go along. I'm just watering mounts and Holey clay pots today. All the other stuff's been done. And it's coming up to the time of year where traditionally over the last few years I've done a complete orchid update. And then at the end of the year I've always tried, and in the main failed miserably, to do an end of season update comparing the plants with the start of season update. This year I'm going to get that right. So basically the start of season updates will, once we get out the other side of Easter into April, you know, when most of the signs of new growth will be there, I'll film each plant individually, and I'll have to keep them individual. If I do them as groups like I've done before, it makes it very difficult to do the comparisons at the end of the season. Now, a quick count up, there's 200 plus plants out here. If they had 10 seconds each, that's quite a lot of video. And knowing me, I can't keep my mouth shut for 10 seconds when I'm talking about a plant. So they'll come up in dribs and drabs. They're obviously not going to post them all together, but during April I will get those start of season updates underway, and the idea is to film them in such a way that the plant and the camera remain static, even if it's only for a couple of seconds. At that point I can take a snapshot of the plant from the video clip and store the snapshot away. Yeah, that's going to make the end of season updates an awful lot easier, because the snapshot can then just be a pop-up, albeit quite a big one. That way we can do the, you know, the idea is to just see what progress the plants make in a growing season. Some will be next to none, some could have doubled in size, but that's the idea of that lot anyway. Okay, Holey clay pots update. Now, don't expect this treatment every time, but quite honestly this table that I'm filming on is quite low, and I'm fed up with the ugly backdrop through the glass of this rubbish waste piece of ground outside the grow room. It just takes the edge off of everything, so I thought if I put the cloth over it, I can't always do this because this table's used for watering. It's normally covered in water and I don't want to get my cloth soaking wet, but I thought if I do this bit of filming before I get everything wet, then I can use my bit of cloth. This first one is it's a community pot effectively. This was all the pieces of my Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry, bulbophyllum Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry. I planted some back bulbs, which all 3 pushed out some new growths, plus I had a pot full of that anyway, which was starting to hang over the edge of the pot. So the idea was to get the whole thing back in a larger pot. There are some new growths. There's a good strong one coming out here. There's another one up the back there, and there's another one down here. But These are still a bit wobbly. They're going to take a while before they settle down in that pot and get well rooted, but the new growths will push out roots that will help hold the whole thing together, hopefully. There's no sign of any spikes or anything on this yet, but it needs to settle down. It hasn't been in this pot long and it's still a bit loose in places, but it's not really a very easy way to hold it in there, apart from just hoping that the roots take off, which they're doing. I can see signs of roots in places pushing out, so it is rooting slowly but surely. But you know, I'm hoping for a real good potful of the same plant, and then perhaps someday down the line we'll get some multiple spikes at the same time. So I think I did get 2 spikes together, but as the second one opened, the first one faded and dropped, so they weren't really quite out together. It would be nice to get several spikes at the same time on this. Right, that's that one. Now this is the big and lousy Non-Cattleya. I do like the blooms. I don't like all the big blousy Cattleyas, but this one, the balance of colours works. Sometimes you get things like, I'm not too keen on the yellow ones with the red lip, for instance. The contrast is a bit great, but even though this has got that yellow in the centre, it still seems to work with the blend of the sort of deep, well, purple almost around the edge of the lip, mirrored on the edge of the other 2 petals, and then the different shades of pink. It works. It's a nice balance of colours, and it's a nice shaped bloom. So I like this one quite a lot. The fact that it's a no ID. The plant itself, I'm really hoping that this is going to push up a second lead. Some of these older leaves are getting a bit manky now, but you have to bear in mind Cattleya leaves have to last a hell of a long time. Trying to keep them in good nick for, you know, 8-10 years is almost impossible. I mean, even this latest leaf here, some bugs got at that in its early life, left a couple of little marks. But anyway, this latest growth with the bloom on, that one will push up an eye when it's finished blooming. But I've got my eye on this back growth as well, because I think there's 2 dormant eyes on there. There's one down here and another one here. It would be nice if one of those would kick off and actually get a second lead on it. Anyway, that's that one. I mean, it's pushed out a lot of good roots in its pot since it was put in there. It was a split. It was a big plant that when I came to repot it, I didn't have a pot big enough, so I thought, right, 2 pieces, start again with 2 halves, and this is one of the halves. But it's coming on, you know, the roots have pushed out well. Gone round the pot, in the pot, hanging out the sides of the pot, which is just the idea of the Holey clay pots, is to do just that, to have the roots go where they please and have a free run and not be confined in any way. And there's a huge amount of air in these pots with the large holes all around the sides, and obviously it's only got larger pieces of bark in there. There's absolutely stacks of air, but it's coming to the time of year when that gives me a workload, because during the winter they were going 5 or 6 days in between watering. Well, it's coming to the point now where it's going to be at least every 3rd day, and come the warmer weather and the much longer days, it'll be every other day. Give them a chance to dry in between, and if we get consecutive hot days, I might even switch to every day. Early in the day, give them a good soak, let them dry off during that day, do it again the next day. Still a wet dry cycle, so it should still work, and that will keep them well hydrated and push on any new growths once they start. And this is one of the newer acquisitions. Nice bright orange with yellow in the frilly lip. A folded lip, trumpet shaped lip, rather than an open one. Not large blooms, and I think these 2 growths I inherited because I haven't had this one long, and this is not a good blooming. 2 blooms and 1, not that good. But as I said, those were growths I inherited. This little growth down here is one that pushed on through the winter, so it's smaller, but nonetheless it's produced 3 blooms. Some nice new roots pushing out from that growth, and a few other places. There's no sign of a new growth yet on this one, but there's quite a lot of eyes around the base of this plant, and given that these two growths here that are in bloom are relatively new growths, each one of those in theory can push up a new shoot from the base, along with this one. Now if I can get another 3 leads on that one, I'll be over the moon, but we'll have to see how it goes. Obviously it's this is its first growing season with me, as the new Cattleya acquisitions were towards the end of last year, so they got repotted and then promptly went into, you know, the winter with the really short days and the lower temperatures. But hopefully they'll pick up now and get some new growths going on them, ready for the next lot of blooms. Well, we haven't finished this lot yet. Oh, this one is the one with the 8-foot name. It's Shin Fong, Little Sun, Young Min, Golden Boy. Got that? Some of these names are getting incredibly long. And even more orange. But this one's just starting to go over. This had 2 spikes on it at the same time, with similar numbers. The other one I cut off a day or 2 ago, and this one's just going. The colours are just fading. Even that one, which is the one that's still looking reasonable, you can see it's starting to go. But this one's pure orange, no other colour on it, and this one's called Young Min Orange. It helps. This is a good plant, big strong plant. The 2 growths that produce the spikes are this one here, full size, good leaves, nice big fat bulb, and the latest growth, the new growth, is just starting to push. It will be good if that eye on the bulb behind actually pushed at the same time. Also on this older one there's an eye at the base. This one's actually got hope for multiple growths. The growth that's still in bloom is showing signs of swelling at the base, but it's not pushing out and breaking out just yet. But possibility of 2, maybe 3 new growths on that one. Massive root system produced on this. It's absolutely filled the pot and crawled out of all the holes. So very easy to keep this one hydrated. Good plant, that one, pleased with that. Older leaves do go, you know, that's a very small older pseudo bulb down here, and again this leaf round here is showing a bit of yellow. That's one of the oldest bulbs on there. They will eventually become leafless, they will drop eventually, but yeah, they stay there effectively until they have no green left. At that point I'm quite happy to take them off, but as long as they've got some green they still work, so they stay. But that one will be out of bloom over the next couple of days, and then we have to patiently wait. But at least the new growths on this will be pushing on in the growing season. It may not bloom until late winter again next year, but some Cattleyas, they've got a better than an annual cycle. They come round like in 10 or 11 months, rather than waiting the full 12 months to bloom at the same time each year. So they can move, the season can slightly change, but that was a winter bloomer for me anyway. The Yavanagara apple blossom has only got a single new growth on it at the moment, which has currently got 3.5 buds. Don't like the look of that little one in the middle, that might not make it, but hopefully 3 blooms on that down the line a bit. Again, this is a reasonable root system, but the new growth that's got the buds on decided to climb. Yeah, and at the moment that new growth still hasn't pushed its new growths out, new roots out. You see what I mean about Cattleyas? Their root growth point is not always with the new growths. The previous growth here has a mass of roots, but the latest growth that's currently in bud has no roots whatsoever. Now it may be that that won't even push out its new roots until the blooms are over, and this is where you get which is it? Does it push its new roots out as the next growth starts, or as the previous growth is fully matured and bloomed? Because in theory they're almost the same point in time, aren't they? But either way, that one doesn't push its new roots out, you know, while the new growth is growing. It waits. So obviously a repot time on this could be different to maybe some of the other Cattleyas. It always pays till you've got to wait till you've got new roots pushing out with Cattleyas, because they will often, not always, lose some of their older roots. So as long as you've got new ones coming on to replace them, you don't set it back much. But if I repotted that just as that new growth was coming out, and it lost some of its old roots, then it wouldn't be getting any for some considerable time. And that's just a reminder to me as well. I've got somebody who wants one of these desperately, and I've said if I spot one at any of the shows, I will get it and post it on. Well, I've been to 2 shows, but they had the same vendors there, and none of them had this particular plant. The RHS show is coming up on April the 7th. I'm more likely to find one there because there's a lot more vendors there. So I haven't forgotten, I will keep my eye out. And if I can get one that looks okay, I'm not getting a manky one, but if I can see one that looks reasonable, I'll get it. Right, this is one of the biggies. This has bloomed for me on the last growth that matured. This one did have 2 leads once upon a time, but I got this cheap because one of them had broken off just before I bought it. Unfortunately, that took it down to 1 lead, which bloomed, and it's now pushing out a nice strong new growth, singular. There are a few eyes lurking on this one. I might be able to re-establish a second lead on this, but it's a wait and see. This is Cattleya Angel Heart, and obviously no reason whatsoever why it won't bloom on this. This is going to be a summer growth, should be right up to full size. It's got a good pot full of roots again, all coming out the sides, all over the place and all down into the pot. So it's got the support system it needs to push out a really strong new growth. 2 would be good, but you can't force these things really. You can always try a trick if you're brave enough, like with this one. It's a rhizome that did split into 2, went off in that direction and in that direction, but this one stalled because it lost its new growth. And then if you work back down the rhizome, if that was a very active eye there, you can play a trick on Cattleyas and cut the rhizome without repotting it. Just chop it and that eye would push, but I think that's totally dormant. There's no green showing on it, so I'm not going to risk it on this one. But it's just an idea. I've seen it work with some people. When the rhizomes start extending and get quite long, you can force some growth out of the back end, providing you've got green eyes that look viable. You just literally chop the rhizome and the plant responds from the back end by thinking its front end has been completely damaged, so it decides to push up new growths, which without that little trigger would probably remain dormant. But anyway, this one's coming on nicely. Now, this is another biggie where I have to make sure my teeth are in straight before I even attempt to say this. That's if the tag will come out without the plant falling over. It's Laelia purpurata, variety Atropurpurea. And that came out okay this time. Normally I struggle with that plant name, there's too many purrs in it. But yeah, that came out okay. Now the tag won't go back in. There's too many roots. I'll just sit it on the top for now. Roots are going round the pot such that the tag won't tuck down anymore because they're attached. Anyway, this is a biggie. I've just measured this. The growths are like 40 centimetres plus 16 odd inches, so it's a very tall plant and could become very ungainly if they all stick out sideways because it'll just keep falling over. But there's a way around that. The idea with the Holey clay pots is, because if you look at this one, I've got a nice strong new growth coming out from under this one and another new growth starting here. Both of these new growths are the ones I grew, and they both absolutely burst into life with the old root system. Couldn't have been more pleased. It came from Ecuagenera back at Malvern back in the summer last year and had very little roots, quite honestly, but it's already getting lopsided. All the growth is over one side, and that was me being silly trying to get the whole plant in the pot when there is no life in the back end of that plant whatsoever. That is dead. So that could have gone up against the side of the pot and this would all now be in the middle. But, yeah, we don't get it right all the time. Now, as far as the growths on this are concerned, these are the two latest ones, and they both have something down in the base. But whether they will turn into a spike, I don't know. But the previous one, no, I don't think there's any sign of life in there either. But quite honestly, it's big enough to bloom. It's definitely big enough to bloom, but I don't know when. It never has, and if it does, I'll be over the moon. So we just have to wait and see with that one. It's got good new growths, 2 more coming, and an excellent root system all over the place. So I don't see why it shouldn't bloom. But then, sometimes they just play games. Now this is a rescue. This is not going to look good for quite a long time. A lot of the old leaves are in a bad state. But I didn't want to lose it because I like the blooms, and as Cattleyas go, it's a nice miniature. It just needs to catch a hold and get a move on, which it looks like it's now doing. This was its last new growth. Slightly distorted leaf, a little pinched, but nonetheless pushing out some new roots at the base. It's 2 pieces in here. And the other piece over to the left hand side, that was its last growth. Not brilliant, some damage on the leaf, pushed up a sheath but didn't do anything with it. But that's got a new growth coming at the base, and again, more roots. That's all this plant needs, is to get a root system established under those pieces, and it will get going. And then eventually these old tatty leaves can be removed. But should have been under the hedge several times in the past, but somehow this one snuck through the system and just managed to hang in there. And don't ask me why, because I don't know, but the blooms are really nice. It's a Sophrocattleya, although most of the Sophronites have been reclassified as Cattleyas, so it's probably just a Cattleya now, but it's Rose Pixie Pinafore, and this particular clone was awarded by the American Orchid Society at some point in its past. Not this actual plant. What would you award that for? Ugliest plant in the show? First. This is the other half of the one I said I split earlier, the one that was in bloom. So this is its sister plant, as I call it. This has just finished blooming on its latest growth. There's no sign of a new growth pushing out from those sheaths just yet. Sheaths that shouldn't be there, should they? Hidey holes. I'll deal with that when I water it in a minute. But yeah, the latest growth that bloomed did establish a reasonable root system under it, so it's on its way to becoming a reasonable plant now. It's got quite a few good roots down in that pot. They're looking a bit dry today. Come on, get some water in there. But yeah, a new growth should form on this quite soon. I don't think it'll manage 2. It'll probably just be the 1, although there is one lurking there. Yeah. Anyway, we shall see. Most likely that'll be another single new growth off the front of this one that's just finished blooming. That's its most likely point of exit. Nice bright green one coming out there. Or greeny purple, most of the Cattleya new growths are. This is another giant height-wise, and this is one of the few non-Cattleya types that's in a Holey clay pot. This is in Cyclia prismatocarpa, and I think they're now called pseudo-encyclias, rename. But I put this one in the pot with these 2 growths, and it pushed out these 2 new growths, which are good growths. They're not bad. Now this thing has never bloomed for me. Whether these 2 new growths will do anything, there is a, let me turn it round, there is a sheath in the bottom of that one, but then that one pushed out a sheath and did nothing. So I don't know what to think about this. It's a wait and see, but it did produce quite a few new roots in its Holey clay pot. Leaves don't look spectacular on this one. Again, bug damage that then just grows in. That's all you can do. This one got scale really bad on its mount. That's been cleaned up now, but yeah, it's growing, but I wouldn't say it's doing brilliantly. This is one of the ones that came out of the big box full, I think. It's actually a species, Cattleya harrisoniana, name clone volcano queen, then crossed again with harrisoniana binot, and it lost its new growth. It's not a happy looking plant at all. It's a leaf damaged in transport there. Not very good roots, no new ones, but those that are there are good enough to hydrate it. But I don't know whether the camera's going to pick this up. I always say Cattleyas are full of surprises. That is a rotted new growth that's growing again. Somehow or other that's managing to start a growth out of what was a rotted new growth. There's a little tiny shoot there. I cannot believe that. I've never seen anything like that before, I must admit. But if it does grow on, at least it gets some new leaves and a new growth. But that is weird. There's no other signs of life on the base of that plant whatsoever. I don't see any eyes, dormant or otherwise. So yeah, that's in a bit of a state, that one. But we'll see what we can do with it. As I say, it's got a growing season coming up. It's got enough roots to hydrate, even though there's very few, if any, growing tips on any of them, but they're still there. They still work even if they haven't got a growing tip. You know, these are still viable roots. They're okay. So it will hydrate. It will get some nutrients into it. We'll see what the hell it does with that, because that is very strange. A weird one. Now, this one was one of a job lot that I got later in the year last year. Didn't have the best root system on it, and it lost its new growth. It didn't take well to being transported, and yeah, it lost its new growth. And this is a strange one as well, because although its leaves don't look too bad, and its pseudobulbs are quite plump, that one got damaged in transit, the bent one. There's no sign of life at the base of this one. Nothing. I don't see any eyes moving, and I don't see any new roots coming. But it has enough roots to keep it hydrated, and some of those roots branched out in the pot and started pushing down, and so there are active growing root tips. But no signs of new growths on that one. That's another one with an 8-foot long name. Siang Yu Red Pearl variety Red Dragonfly. I wonder what colour that one is then. Do you know what? I was looking round this morning at the oranges and some pinks and assorted things. I've got no red. The number of plants I've got that have red blooms is minimal. Well, this is one. It better be red when it comes out. But yeah, I've got very, very few red orchids. I've got Masai red, and that's obviously red, it's in the name, but very little else. I think one of my Miltoniopsis, if it ever blooms again, is red, with markings obviously, but basically red, and this one. There isn't much else that's red. Anyway, no sign of life on that at the moment, but there is some active root growth. So somewhere or other that thing needs to find an eye to push out from somewhere. And at the moment I see nothing. So that's a wait and see. And last but not least, this is another one of the late in the year acquisitions from last year that took off like a little rocket. Nice little miniature. Nice miniature bifoliate, this one. I think it's still quite a young plant, as it hasn't bloomed on any of these growths yet. But it generated a new root system quite well during the winter. That's quite good. And this little winter growth pushed on, not quite up to full size, but you know, that's what helped push the root system out, so we can't complain. And roots came out from the older part of the plant on this one. So this one's coming on nicely. I doubt if that little winter growth is going to bloom, but it's highly likely the next new growth, wherever it comes out, may well bloom. And it could come out almost anywhere on that plant. Effectively, that's got two leads. It's got this one. That was there when I got it. It matured, wasn't fully grown. And then this little growth pushed on through the winter. So it's got two leads. So in theory, two new growths to come at some point with a good root system to back it up. There's no reason why one of those next couple of growths shouldn't bloom. Okay, so that's the Holey clay pots. in various stages, from being rescued and not doing very well at all, to coming on nicely, to some that were actually in bloom during this update. So yeah, I'll keep you posted on these, and thanks for dropping by.